Hi, I'm Christy, and I'm going to show you how to make super easy overnight sourdough bread. I made a video a couple of years ago and people had lots of questions, but the number one question was, can we see the crumb when you cut into it? So this is my shot at doing that. Thanks so much for watching and happy baking. So the first thing you need to do is feed your starter. I took a sourdough class a few years ago where we were given a starter that was about 8 years old already. So this one's probably about 11 at this point, if not older than that. I kind of lost track of time. So this is Sheila. Our instructor told us to name our starter so other people in our homes would not throw it away when they see this bubbling mass in the refrigerator. So Sheila stays in the refrigerator when I'm not baking, and truth be told, I can go for a couple of weeks without baking, so I just make sure that I feed her in between, and I'll show you how to feed her right now. So there's about a tablespoon of starter in there. I dispose of all that I'm not needing to use, and just to feed and for the purpose of baking this one loaf, I'm going to use about a tablespoon of starter, and then I have about a quarter cup of flour here, and I'm just using all-purpose flour because we're in the midst of a global pandemic and I did not find bread flour. So I use about a quarter cup of all-purpose flour, and then I have slightly less than a quarter cup of water. Just add that to my starter, and then I'll stir it up, and it should be a little pasty, almost to the consistency of hummus or so. And then you'll leave your starter to feed for anywhere between 3 and 6 hours, and I usually go for the 6 hours. So that's all that's entailed in feeding your starter. Here we have all of our ingredients, and again, I'm using all-purpose flour because that's what's available to me, and it's going to work just fine. I have a teaspoon of salt here, a cup and a half of water, and our starter that has been feeding for about 4 hours at this point. So mixing this up is incredibly simple. I just showed you all of the ingredients. So we have our flour and our salt, and I'm just going to add the salt to the flour and give it a little mix. And I know that baking is supposed to be science, but honestly it's art, and once you get to know the ingredients and you get familiar and comfortable with it, I'm really pretty lazy about following any specific instructions. So I have my starter here, and because I know I just need to keep about a tablespoon of starter, I'm going to add all except for about a tablespoon to my flour mix here. And then lastly, and I'm going to stir it in a little bit, but lastly, we're going to add the cup and a half of water. Made a little bit of a well in the center here. Adding that to the flour mixture, and we'll just stir that in. So as you can see, it's developing into a very nice sticky dough ball. Not too sticky though, it's not sticking to the sides here. I can basically pick the whole thing up with, well, I could if I had both hands available, but you can see what it looks like here. So just a couple of minutes of mixing things together, and then I'm just going to cover this up and let it sit out overnight, and I'll let you know what it looks like tomorrow. Here she is all covered up. I've had a lot of people ask, what do I do with the dough? I usually just leave it on the countertop covered up. You could use plastic wrap if you'd like, or some other type of airtight cover. Obviously this is not airtight. And if I know I'm not going to be cooking it within 16 or so hours, then I will put it in the refrigerator. It's been about 14 hours at this point, so let's take a look at our dough and see how she's doing. Pretty good. See lots of nice air bubbles. So I'm going to go ahead and preheat the oven to 500 degrees before I turn the dough out. And I'm going to put my Dutch oven in without the lid at this point. Get it nice and warm for when we're ready to add the bread. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and turn our dough out onto a floured surface. I like using this Silpat because it's super easy to clean up rather than using my countertop. So you can see the dough is slightly sticky, sticking to the sides of the bowl here. which is nice. It gives it some nice gluten and some legs. I use the tuck and fold method that I learned from my instructor who was at Sour Flour in San Francisco. So no kneading is involved. That's the whole point of this overnight process. And basically all you need to do to get a really nice shape is bring your dough out, hopefully you can see this, to a somewhat rectangular shape here. And then just bring the corners in to each other to form a ball. So hopefully you can see what I've done here. And that's it. That's all that's entailed. Now I also sometimes like to add a little bit of wheat bran just to add some nice texture to it. So you can either do that during the tuck and fold process afterward, or if you want to, you can flatten it out again into your rectangle, and you can see nice air bubbles in here that have formed. Add a little bit more, tuck and fold again. And we're just gonna let this sit until the oven is finished preheating. So the next thing that you're going to want to do is score your bread, and I usually wait until right before I put the bread in the oven to do that. And I like to use just a serrated steak knife because it can make a couple of really quick gashes in the bread, and you don't have to go back and do any sawing. You could do whatever kind of scoring you'd like to do, but I usually do 3 quick slashes. Once your oven is completely preheated and your pan is preheated, then go ahead and lift your dough, being really careful to try to maintain the shape, and then just drop it in as carefully as you can to the pan. And place the lid on and go ahead and bake it at 500 degrees for 30 minutes. So it's been 30 minutes and we're going to go ahead and, oh, that steam coming out of the oven. Take the lid off, and you can see she's coming along nicely. And we're gonna reduce the heat to 450 and bake for probably another 5 minutes or so. Right, we just hit 5 minutes at 450, so let's take a look and see how she's doing. Pretty good. If you listen closely, you can hear the sourdough crackling when it comes out of the oven. Some people refer to this as the sourdough singing. Now everyone wants to see the crumb on this baby, right? It's extremely hot still, so bear with me. You can see the nice crisp edge here. And the steam emanating from this guy. There we go. So as you can see, it's incredibly easy, and once you do it a couple of times, you will feel like a total pro. I personally am just a hobby baker, but I've been doing it for a few years and have gotten to really enjoy it. So if you have any questions, feel free to add them to the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer them. And I look forward to hearing how it goes for you. Happy baking and bon appetit.